Before we wrap up, I was just wondering if any of you brothers wanted to share any miracles that you've witnessed or been a part of.
Okay, I can begin. And so I got to ask you, Brother Jared, how many hours do we have in this program now? Okay. Because, praise the Lord. I mean, I've been witness to many miracles over my lifetime in my family and the church. And so really, I have, I've looked over a long list of them prior to this, to kind of just pick a couple to share with you. And so I'll just share, a couple of them that kind of demonstrate the different points that we've talked about today. Right, and I mean, to me, a cornerstone miracle of my family, occurred when my grandparents met the church. Right, that they totally believed in the power of God was in this church, and really took it maybe to an extent that none of us would do today. That they had an accident that my grandfather was backing his car out of his driveway and ran over his son, who 18 months old, standing behind the car. He ran over him and crushed his legs. And so instead of taking him to the hospital, they brought him in the house and laid him on the bed and prayed and left him there. Right. So as I say, today that would be very much frowned upon. Right. But what happened then is my grandfather went to work. My grandmother went in the kitchen and started doing her work. And a short time later, she feels a tug at her house dress, and there's her little boy is walking and is fine. Right? His legs were healed. I mean, they had been totally crushed at the knees by the heavy car, and he was totally healed. Now that Sunday in church, I mean, she was praising God for a great miracle in their life, and my grandfather was actually almost a little embarrassed because maybe he hadn't seen the whole thing, so he kind of told her, you kind of maybe overdid that. I mean, a little accident, but everything is okay. Well, see, that night, as he tells the story, I mean, he was laying in bed and he heard a tapping at his window. I guess he had a first floor bedroom, and he went over to the window and opened the window, and there standing outside the window was a man, basically an angel, but it was a man holding two shopping bags, and in one bag was the baby's legs, and the other bag was the rest of the baby, and said, "But for the grace of God, this would be your son." Right? So then he knew that was a miracle, and so we grew up hearing that miracle. That little boy grew up to be my father. Right? So had he been killed or paralyzed, I may have never been born. So I praise God for that. So that's an example of a healing of the body, right, which was a clear miracle. Right? But as we've stated, there's other types of miracles also. And for any young people that might be watching this, I would encourage that you would pray to God for your schooling, for your career, and so forth. And God will intervene. All right, if you're really looking to follow the will of God. Now I made a little. I'll say it might have seemed like a little mistake, or shortly after I joined the church, where I was so interested in the Book of Mormon. I never read it really at that point. I read it cover to cover, and so as I was reading the Book of Mormon, what I was not reading was my college textbook, right? So that I came up to the midterm for my political science was the topic, and was the course. And so I figured I would just, study the night before and cram. And so I take out the textbook the night before and realize that the test is going to cover 400 pages of material, which I had not read. So I said, well, this is not happening. And so as I prayed, and I kind of apologized to God for being lax in this. And again, I don't recommend anybody do the same, all right? But I asked God to help me with this test, and I put the book on the table, and it fell open to a page, and I read one page about something called John Locke's theory, and I said, okay, well, I understand one page anyway out of 400, and so I closed the book and went to bed. And the next day, as you might surmise, all right, the test was a choice of a few essays, and the number one essay was explain John Locke's theory, right? And so there it was. So I passed the test. Now, as I said, I don't recommend that as a way of studying. That I believe that you should study and prepare. But in that case, I felt like it was for a good reason, because I was so interested in the Book of Mormon that I believe God helped me. Right? So I certainly count that as a miracle. Right? But we also say that. That receiving a message from God is a miracle. I was driving to work one day, and I was about to exiting from a highway, and I was about to turn left onto a busy street, and I look up the hill, and here's a big Mack truck is barreling down the hill. Now, again, being a young guy, I can make this with no problem. I can quick turn left, get across, and head up the hill. I actually heard. In the car, I heard the word "no" in the car. It's like the only time that ever happened to me. I actually heard the actual word "no" in the car. So as hard as it was, I pulled my foot back from the gas pedal, and I didn't go, right? And I let the truck pass me. It passed. The wind just shook my car. It was going so fast. Okay, now it's safe to proceed. And I hit the gas pedal, and then my car pulled across the intersection and stalled. We're dead right in the intersection, right? The truck would have flattened me. So God spared my life with one word. And so you receive a message, and you receive it. That's a miracle from God, right? And I'll just share one more, which is again, we talked about God sharing or revealing that Christ is this Son of God and so forth. I was a witness to a definite instance of this. We had a sister in our church whose husband, he was a really mean guy, right? He didn't like her coming to church. Sometimes he wouldn't give her gas money to go to church. They lived an hour and a half away, and so just as the years passed, she was getting more and more fed up with him, and finally she told him she was going to go visit her parents in some other state for a week, and it was 2 weeks, it was 3 weeks, it was a month, and it became clear that she wasn't coming back. So this man decided that I was the answer to getting her back. So he called me and said, I was away on a missionary trip, but he left a message and said, I want you to call my wife and tell her that it's her duty to come back to me, right? And so needless to say, I wasn't home, so I didn't respond, and he left a couple of messages. The last of which was, well, since you're not answering my calls or calling me back, I'm going to come up to the Levittown church building this Sunday, and I'll see you in the parking lot. Right? So as I prepared for that, I drove over to the Levittown church and made sure I got there first, and that there was this beat up truck sitting in the parking lot, and I said, gee, I wonder who this guy is here to see. And so I got out of my car, and this gruff looking man got out of his truck, and he comes walking over, like, real determined, and he comes right up to me, throws his arms around me, and starts crying on my shoulder. Right now, I mean, of all the things I thought might have happened that day, that was the last that I would have thought would have happened. And when he composed himself, he said, I had very bad thoughts of what I was going to do here today and through the week. He says, last night I had a dream, and God told me that I was wrong. God told me I needed to be a better husband and be a better man and to change my life. And I believe that this is where I can learn how to do that. And that's exactly what happened. He came into church that day. He attended for a while, asked for his baptism. He was baptized. He and his wife were reconciled, right? And he was a changed man. He was a humble, kind man. And so I witnessed that was a great miracle that I witnessed, right? The total changing of a man. And a couple of years later, he got cancer and he passed away. I believe he went to the paradise of God. So that was a great miracle as well, that it was a message about Christ being the Son and looking to him that was received. So these are just, like I said, a few miracles that I've witnessed. As I said, there are many more, but I'm always happy to be a firsthand witness for miracles that the Lord has done to let others know that the power of God still exists and miracles have not ceased today.
Well, I can add a few of those examples as well. Enjoyed the examples that Brother Jerry gave, and many of them are similar in the situations that we face. Sometimes it's affliction, sometimes it's at school, sometimes it's at work when we're driving our cars, but the Lord intervenes oftentimes. And I can think of a few occasions where I was sitting at a red light, Brother Jerry, just like you, and the light turned green, and I didn't go. I hesitated. A car flies through the intersection, and my heart starts to pound because I realized had I gone, I would have been, hit broadsided. And I remember looking down, and I had my blessed oil, bottle of oil that we use to anoint. I had it in my pocket. And when I looked down at my pants, I saw a spot of oil that had somehow, I'll say miraculously, the bottle opened, leaked. I reached into my pocket, took it out. It seemed like it was sealed, but here was this small little stain on my pants. And I felt like that was just a confirmation of the Lord placing his hand upon us in his protection, that had I gone, I would have been, who knows how bad I would have been injured or killed. But the Lord just held back enough, and that little drop of oil that came through on my pants reminded me that the Lord's anointing was upon us. Another time I was in school, and I had studied for my test. I was well prepared. The teacher didn't trust us. This was in college, and we had our desks separated by 6, 7, 8 feet apart, so no one would cheat. And it was an open book test. It was in my major, and it was important. This was the final, and if you passed the final, you'd pass the class. If you didn't, you'd probably fail. There was a lot of pressure. And I remember I read the first question, and I had no idea. And I read the second question. I had no idea. And I had prepared for this test, and I had studied, and I went to class. I did all my homework. I was ready. Third question, and the last question. I had no idea. And I thought, well, now I'm going to fail. And I remember in the classroom just putting my head down on the desk and praying and saying, Lord, I need your help. I did all that I could. I did my part. I need you to help me. And immediately when I said that, I felt a tap that firm on my shoulder, and I turned and looked, and there was no one there. Again, the desks were far apart, and I just felt immediately that was the Lord, whether it was an angel, whether it was the Lord tapping me on the shoulder, and I felt strength. I went back, and I answered every question as best I could. I stayed after class. I wanted to see if I passed, and I did. Thank God. The Lord opened my mind to that which I had studied, because, again, I looked to him. I did all that I could. He came through. I felt like that was miraculous, because I was sure I was going to fail. I had no idea how to approach those questions. Another time when I was on a mission trip in Africa, sat through an entire meeting, and one woman just sat there in what I would say was just a stupor. She had no expression on her face. She didn't seem to have any emotion. When we sang, she didn't sing. When we would pray, she didn't even bow her head. She just sat there. And the brothers had planned on a few baptisms that day of individuals who had already asked for a baptism. And when it came time, she stood in the line with those who were going to get baptized. And I remember going to the brothers saying, this woman is repenting? I saw nothing. I mean, not just that we have to have emotion, but no interaction, no expression of anything. And the brothers, they kind of gave me the trust us. Well, they asked her at the water shore if she repented of her sins. She said yes. You promised to serve God all the days of your life? Yes. She went to the water, and she stood there in the water, again, expressionless. And I thought, this is very strange. The brother baptized her, put her under. When she came up out of the water, she had a smile on her face. She was so happy. It was like night and day. And later when I talked with the brothers, I said, help me understand what transpired here. They said, Brother Frank, this woman has struggled with evil spirits her entire life. She has struggled with these almost like emotionless conditions in her body where she just is like a statue. She just has no response. She's just, almost not even, barely interactive. And finally, when she built the courage and the strength and the faith to want to get into that line, we knew it was her way of seeking the Lord. And ever since then, ever since she came out of that water, those evil spirits have been cast out of her. She's never been troubled again. And we went back to the church. She was singing. She was smiling, hugging everyone, just hugging her children. And she became literally a new person. Just amazing. And to me, again, we talked about the healings and miracles. The greatest is the saving of a soul. And to witness that and to see that transformation, I'll never forget the beauty of seeing that change in her. And that's true, maybe not so outwardly for all of us, but that's true for everyone who gives their life to the Lord, that change that comes over us. So just a few, and as Brother Jerry said, we could go on for hours listing the beautiful miracles and experiences that we've seen in the gospel of Jesus Christ.
It certainly is cause for reminiscence to listen to my brothers tell of the miracles that they've have been part of their lives or they witnessed, and I could probably try to match the type of each of them because they're so replete, and I've heard many testimonies of the afflicted ones that have had, let's say, a cancerous tumor, come to the church, have been anointed, go back to the doctor, and the doctor had no way to explain why that tumor was gone. That's been commonplace to hear that type of a testimony. As a child, see that lamp, right? I put my finger right on it. That lamp. You might say, why does Brother Peter have such an ugly lamp in his office? Well, that piece of log is actually a piece of the Detroit City water pipes, the original Detroit City water pipes that were made out of wood with hollowed out wood. And my grandfather was involved, along with many, many other laborers, in changing those pipes to metal pipes that replaced them. And basically, he was in the ditch. They call them ditch diggers. I mean, that's what the common term is. And one time he was in a cave-in, completely caved in upon him. He was gone. He had to be dug out. Everybody dropped what they were doing and ran. And they had, of course, you can't use a machine. You have to dig him out by hand. And it took quite some time to get to him. They got him out. Of course, they sent him to the hospital. But basically, there was nothing wrong with him. And those are the kinds of things that we attribute to the Lord being, those are not like we had a chance to sit down and beg the Lord for intervention days at a time. Those are the miracles that are just part of him walking with us as we try to serve him. And I had in my own life those sorts of things. As a boy, I made that lamp too, by the way, when I was in junior high school. So the craftsmanship is like a 12-year-old's craftsmanship. When I was a boy, I had an injury. It was, just playing with kids, and somebody threw a stick and it came into my ear. And we were playing like we were in Africa, and he was throwing a spear at an animal, and it just went awry. So it was intentionally thrown with force, and it cut my ear. And I ran home bleeding like crazy. And my mother, we had no second car. My dad wasn't home. My mother tried. She was putting compresses on. She was doing what she could. And she said, this thing is wide open. It needs stitches. Which, of course, I just started screaming. And she really didn't have any convenient way to get to the hospital. So she just prayed. And when she finished praying, the bleeding stopped. And I was, 7 or 8 years old. And those are the kinds of things, like Jerry's grandfather. Those are things that you could never convince. No way could you convince Brother Jerry's father that there's no such thing in miracles in modern times. And I feel the same way. And after you have those things happen in your life, you can hear all the rationales and science that you want, or whatever you want to use to dissuade. It won't work. We just believe in the power of God. And I, along with my brothers, I could go on and on. I think Jerry said, how many hours do we have? We could go on and on, testifying of the power of God manifest in miracles in modern times.